The sun came up slowly over Meadowlark Street, the way it always did in the part of town where the houses leaned a little, and the paint always looked like it was thinking about peeling. Inside Unit 4B of the Cypress Ridge Apartments, a young woman lay awake in the blue-gray light, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had always looked, to her, like a lopsided birthday cake. Today was her birthday. Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness and unseen connections that change lives, help motivate us to post more by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you are watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful true stories alive. Paige Woods was 23 years old, and she had $3.47 in her pocket. She counted it again, 3 crumpled dollar bills and a fistful of change, as if maybe she'd miscounted the first 4 times. She hadn't. After paying the electricity bill, splitting the rent with what little her grandmother's disability check allowed, and buying the 2 medications Grandma Rose couldn't live without, this was what was left of everything. $3.47. She folded the bills carefully and set them on the nightstand beside her water bottle and her phone charger and the small framed photo of her mother, a woman she barely remembered, who had left when Paige was 4 and never explained why. Paige sat up slowly, shifting her weight with practiced precision, and reached for the rails on either side of her bed. At 7 months old, a rare spinal condition had taken away what most people never thought about twice: the casual miracle of walking. She had never run through a yard, never skipped down a school hallway, never danced at prom. She had lived her entire life from the height of a wheelchair, which meant she had learned early to see the world differently, to notice things other people stepped right over. She noticed, for instance, that today was beautiful outside. She noticed a neighbor's child across the courtyard, blowing bubbles from a balcony, watching them drift and pop. She noticed that her grandmother had already woken up before her and was in the kitchen. She could smell it making tea. Rose Woods was 71 years old, bent at the shoulders, and absolutely, relentlessly fierce. She had raised Paige from the age of 4 with no help, no cosigner, and no complaints, at least not loud ones. She'd worked the breakfast shift at a diner for 11 years until her knees gave out. Then she cleaned offices at night until her hands couldn't manage a mop anymore. Now she sat in her own chair, moved a little slower, and used a cane with a rubber grip she'd wrapped in yellow electrical tape because the original grip had worn smooth. When Paige rolled into the kitchen, Rose was standing at the stove, stirring something. "Happy birthday, baby," she said, without turning around. "Grandma, what are you doing?" "Making oatmeal. That's not what it smells like." Rose turned with a small, knowing smile. On the counter, beside the stove, sat a single cupcake on a saucer of chocolate, with a swirl of vanilla frosting and 1 birthday candle stuck in the top. It was slightly lopsided. The frosting had a thumbprint on the side where Rose had clearly tried to smooth it out. It was the most beautiful thing Paige had ever seen. "I bought the mix last week," Rose said quietly, setting the saucer on the kitchen table. "Little bit at a time. Didn't touch the bill money." Paige stayed at the cupcake. She pressed her lips together. "Don't you cry," Rose warned. "I'm not crying. Your eyes are sweating. It's hot in here." They laughed. They always laughed. That was how they survived. They turned the hard things sideways until they caught the light. Paige had spent every birthday of her life wanting something she couldn't name exactly. Not gifts, not a party necessarily, just the feeling that the day mattered. That she mattered. That somewhere in the noise of bills and medical appointments and people who stared too long at her wheelchair and the ache of a mother who never called, there was room for a little joy. A table with balloons. A proper cake with her name on it. Candles. Singing. The ordinary magic that other people got to take for granted. She had never had that. Not once. She blew out the candle on the lopsided cupcake, made a wish she didn't say out loud, and ate it in 4 bites. It tasted like love and sacrifice and flour. It was perfect. It wasn't enough. She hadn't meant to go to Baker's Corner Grocery. She'd been rolling past it on the way to the pharmacy 2 blocks down when the window stopped her. Right there, in the center display, was a cake. Not just any cake. A 3-tiered white cake with gold-dusted flowers along the edges and a ribbon of pale pink frosting that spiraled up from the bottom tier to the top like a staircase. A handwritten tag in the window read, "Custom birthday cakes made fresh daily." Paige sat in front of that window for longer than she meant to. She thought about the $3.47. She thought about the price tag on the smallest version of that cake, $34, which she'd seen when she'd once stepped inside, 2 months ago, on someone else's errand. She turned away. That's when she almost rolled directly into him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of tiredness behind his eyes that money doesn't fix, the kind that comes from raising a child alone. He was holding a list in one hand and a phone to his ear in the other, and he was clearly not watching where he was going. "Oh, hey, I'm so sorry," he said immediately, lowering the phone. "I wasn't looking. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Paige said. "I'm pretty hard to miss, though." He laughed a real laugh, surprised out of him. "Fair point. Tyreek," he said, extending his hand. "Paige." His daughter appeared from behind him, then a small girl of about 6 with 2 puffs of hair and enormous brown eyes. She pointed at Paige's wheelchair with pure, uncomplicated fascination. "Does it go fast?" she asked. "Amra," Tyreek said, a note of gentle correction. "It's okay," Paige said, smiling at the girl. "Pretty fast, yeah. Faster than I can run." Amra's eyes went wide. "I want one." Tyreek pinched the bridge of his nose. Paige laughed. "Is today your birthday?" Amra asked, pointing now at Paige's small pharmacy bag, which had a little birthday sticker on it. The pharmacist always put one on in June. Paige had never asked why. Paige paused. "It is, actually. Are you getting a cake?" The question landed simply, the way children's questions always do. No weight, no malice, just pure honest curiosity. And somehow, that made it heavier. "Not today," Paige said softly. Amora looked at her father with an expression that needed no translation. Tyreek Tar had built his logistics company from a single van and a spreadsheet at his kitchen table. He'd spent 6 years sleeping 4 hours a night, missing parties, missing dates, missing everything until suddenly he wasn't poor anymore. He had cars and accounts and a house in a good part of the city. He had all of it. What he didn't have was his daughter's mother, who had walked out when Amra was 2. And what he understood deeply, personally, was what it felt like to keep going anyway, to be the one who stayed. He looked at Paige. He looked at the cake in the window. He looked at Amra, who was tugging his sleeve. "Come back inside with us," he said to Paige. "Please." "You don't have to." "I know I don't," he said. "I want to." What happened next, Paige would describe later as the most quietly overwhelming 30 minutes of her life. Tyreek walked into Baker's Corner and spoke to the woman behind the counter. He didn't buy the display cake. He asked for something better, a fresh cake, as big as they could make on short notice, with Paige written across the top in gold. He asked for balloons from the shop next door. He bought a box of candles. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant and did something Paige couldn't quite hear, speaking low and quickly. Then he turned back to her. "I know this is strange," he said, "and I know we're strangers, but my daughter has a gift for pointing out the right thing to do. She gets that from her grandmother." Paige opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "You said it's your birthday," he said simply. "You should have a birthday." They sat at a table in the small cafe attached to the bakery. Amra arranged the balloons with extreme seriousness. The woman from the bakery brought out the cake on a board with little candles already pressed into the frosting, 23 of them, because Paige had mentioned her age. Tyreek's assistant arrived 20 minutes later with 2 other people from his office, a woman named Dana and a man named Jerome who had apparently been in the area and needed zero convincing to come to an impromptu birthday party for a stranger. They were loud. They were warm. They sang happy birthday, slightly off-key and completely without shame. Paige sat at the center of it, this wild, improbable table of near strangers with a cake that had her name on it in gold, surrounded by balloons, with 23 candles throwing little points of light across her face. She had wished for this. Every year since she could remember, she had wished for exactly this. She closed her eyes. She blew out every single candle. Tyreek was not a man who did things halfway. Over the following weeks, he connected Paige, who had a quiet brilliance with numbers and spreadsheets she taught herself on a library computer, with a remote position at his company, a real salary, benefits, He connected Grandma Rose with a senior assistance program he personally funded through a non-profit he'd started in his mother's name. He didn't do it to be a hero. He did it because he understood, bone deep, what it meant to need one person to simply see you and to act. He and Paige became friends, then something warmer and harder to name. Slowly, over months of long phone calls and Sunday dinners, and Amara insisting Paige teach her how to do wheelchair wheelies in the parking lot. But that is another story. The 3rd of June, 1 year later. The cake had 4 tiers. Paige had picked it out herself, from the same baker's window on Meadowlark Street, except this time. She went inside, ordered it 3 weeks in advance, paid for it herself from her own account with money she had earned. Grandma Rose sat at the head of the table in a new chair, comfortable, properly cushioned, and wore the earrings Paige had bought her. Amora had made a paper banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Paige," with 4 exclamation points and a drawing of a wheelchair with flames on the wheels. When they sang, it was loud and off-key and completely perfect. Paige looked around the table at Rose, at Tyreek, at Amora, at Dana and Jerome, at the friend she was slowly, carefully learning to keep, and she thought about the water stain on her old ceiling, the one that looked like a lopsided birthday cake. She thought, I don't see it as a coincidence anymore. She closed her eyes, made a different wish this time, not for something she lacked, but for something she wanted to hold on to, and she blew out every single candle. Some doors don't open until the right person decides to knock, and sometimes that person finds you in a parking lot because a 6-year-old was paying attention.